All right, welcome to Block Party. I'm your host, Mike Wald. This is the one of the few off-season shows I guess we'll actually do. Thanks for watching. You can check out our show on Process to Perform channel on YouTube. And check me out, Mike Wald68 on X. Process to Perform on, I haven't done this in a while, on Instagram. Also, I think this might line up on Andy Herman's Pack a Day podcast. So if it does, thank you, Andy. And as always, guys, I'm not sponsored by Caffeine and Kilos, but boy, I sure would love to be. So listen, I got a bunch of listener questions I just wanted to get to. There's a lot going on, obviously, right before free agency here. And people ask me stuff on X. I figure it's easier if I just answer them all here. So first of all, thank you, everybody, for those that are bringing in those questions. But let's just start off by some housekeeping items, kind of what's going on in Packland since the offseason. Obviously, we got some re-signings. We got some trades. Guys are expected to leave. I think the biggest thing that happened, the most dramatic thing that happened probably was Sean Gary tweeting out his goodbye before he actually got traded, but then it turns out he might actually be traded now to the Dallas Cowboys. Sounds like the Packers are going to receive a 4th-round pick for that. Saves the Packers $11 million in cap space. I think his number is like 19.8 or something like that next year. So I know Jerry Jones said he was going to spend some money. That's a crazy pickup for them if they're going to spend. Now that the cap's $300 million, thinking $19.8 million maybe isn't that big a bag. If you're a supporter of the trade, you're probably saying, he did make the Pro Bowl the year before. Although I don't know if that tape kind of mirrors. The thing about the Pro Bowl now is it's just you don't know what everybody's watching. Are they just looking at statistics? I don't know. Some of these, it was just an interesting selection, I guess, is the best way for me to put that. Having been a big Rashawn Gary fan for his entire career, by the way, I think that's a fantastic trade for the Packers. You get a 4th-round pick back. Clearly, he wasn't in form the second half of the season. We saw, early on when he was getting sacks, it was a lot of free rushes and just opportunities created by Micah Parsons. Not that couldn't have been replicated again, but once Micah went down and you just kind of saw the level of effort. Actually, when Micah was still playing, but you saw the level of effort on kind of some of the pocket chases and whatnot, and then the lack of just one-on-one wins in the pass rush game. You got to feel pretty good about that trade. I think a lot of Packer fans, or at least people in the locker room and in the front office, were expecting to happen as the season unfolded. From a resigning standpoint, I thought it was a big deal. We brought back Sean Ryan, 3-year deal, just about $11 million a year. I want to put this in perspective. A lot of people asked this to me, and obviously he came in. I think he played 8 or 9 games last year at the center position. There's a couple comments that are made on X, and I try not to pay attention, but there's some things that are just like factually wrong. Like Sean Ryan's not a tackle. He was at UCLA, but he's not anymore. He got benched at right guard. That's what, because of his performance. That's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it would be like they gave their 1st-round pick an opportunity to play there. He clearly wasn't the guy. And I thought if you go back and watch the tape, you'd see that Sean Ryan was playing right guard at a much higher level than Jordan Morton was before Sean moved to center. I'll stand by the tape on that. Listen, I think it's easy just to look at Sean Ryan's contract and with just 8 or 9 games under his belt, but it's really the body of work, the work that he puts into practice, the professionalism he carries himself with, kind of the grit that he shows on the field that this team somewhat lacks. Him and Aaron Banks in particular tried to infuse that with the team this year. And look, he's got great footwork. He plays with pretty good leverage. He's got a little, the hairs up on the back of his neck. He seems to be a good communicator, which I think is probably the biggest thing you're thinking of when you start worrying about, who's going to be that center position. So I really like this move. I think he's an ascending player. I said it a couple of days ago, and what that means is I just think his ceiling is going to be somewhat higher than what was shown by Jenkins last year before he got injured. So I like the move. And the thing you have to keep in mind is like Tyler Linderbaum is asking for somewhere between like $21 and $23 million a year. So the cap's over $300 million. So when you start talking about what is real money for a center, who's got a couple starts, but you expect to start for at least the next 3 years on your team, on a team like the Green Bay Packers, who is a playoff team, who a lot of people think are Super Bowl contenders. $11 million for a center isn't, that's a really, really good deal for both parties. So I like that move. Also, we signed back a special teamer, Nick Neiman. And then Chris Brooks got another 2-year deal for like $2.5 million a year. Those are just those are good. Listen, everybody talks about the top 22 players on the roster. Really, the next 30 players that would determine whether or not you're going to win a Super Bowl. Those guys are really important players. We just don't spend that much time on them. Like we talked about with the trade, we got Rashawn Gary. I love that trade. I love that we got something back for him. The big trade, I think, is the Colby Wooden trade to the Colts. So we get, with that Wooden trade, we get Zaire Franklin. And Zaire Franklin, now he had, I think, it's easy for me to argue that he was one of the better linebackers in the league before. I think he had an injury a couple of years ago. But he has been a high level player for the Indianapolis Colts. We're probably going to lose Quay Walker. I'll talk about that in a minute. And while that swap is fantastic because I think Zaire Franklin's a better player than Quay Walker, that's an interesting one to me because now you just keep looking at that defensive line room, and I'm gonna group them all together. And in the last couple of years, you got rid of your 2 starting D tackles. You just got rid of another D tackle that, if you want to call him a part-time starter or a starter, he's certainly one of them. And you got rid of one of your starting defensive ends. So there's a lot of transient movement in that room. There's a lot of turnover. There has really only been production from one player. He's coming off an injury. It'll be interesting to see how they draft. It'll be interesting to see if they spend any money in free agency. I don't even know who the big names in free agency are. Obviously, there's an opportunity to trade. Maybe that's a draft day trade. But you would think, and I think I think he's gotten better every year, which is the most important thing. And he does provide a little bit of a pass rush. I do think that you better figure out who is going to step up in that room. You're still undersized. You still don't have, now you have even less of a pass rush interiorly. I think you probably feel good about everybody that was playing behind Rashawn Gary, maybe more than Rashawn Gary at the end of the season. So I'll just kind of shelf that as far as I don't think that's a net loss as he was playing the last year. But it is a question mark with a team that already had a question mark up front, particularly inside. And it really got exposed. You think about the Baltimore game, you think about the end of the season, they really got exposed in that area in particular. As good as Zaire Franklin is, he's not going to be able to solve that problem. So they're going to have to do some work there for sure. And then you think about, I think I just read that Malik Willis is going to sign with the Dolphins. So it looks like he's gone. You feel fantastic for him. Obviously, that's going to be a really interesting move, with Halfley going down there. That's probably the biggest, well, I'll get to it, probably the biggest move of the offseason. But with Malik Willis going down there, that backup quarterback who has just really produced for us. We had Doug Peterson as our backup when Brett was there. And the playbook didn't change that much. You just knew, with respect to Doug, and I think Doug started in the league. Obviously, he's been a great coach in the league as well. We kind of knew that, like, if he came in, there was something was going to change. There was something wrong, right? With Malik Willis, it's one of the few backups where he came in and every single time it felt like he produced, and he produced at a high level, and he produced at a level that was high enough where the conversation was, is this guy a starter? If we ever went into a slump at the quarterback position, is this guy something you feel good about, actually turning that into a challenge, which is absurd. Of course, Jordan Love is a bona fide budding star in this league, but just more of a compliment to how well Malik Willis was playing. I think some of the other departures you want to think about is Romeo Doubs is a free agent. Now, he led the team in receiving in 2025, 55 catches, 724 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's probably gone. It's always been a crowded room. And with Matthew Golden getting another year, obviously Christian Watson stepping up, and really, I think everybody feeling like he is the number one guy in that room now. Romeo Doubs is probably going elsewhere to see if he can make a couple bucks, maybe go into a place where he's going to get a couple more looks, maybe expand his route tree. Got to feel happy for him. I think he did exactly what he wanted to do coming in as a later round draft pick and producing, showing up in training camp, putting the work in. Obviously had a little speed bump I think it was last year or the year before. but you just don't hear anything but good things coming out of the locker room about that guy. I think he's always produced. Obviously you talk about this group in general and some of the drops, this, that, and the other. The reality is, I think he's done everything as a professional at a really high level. I'm happy to see guys like that leave and hopefully get some more money. If he was to stay here, you'd be happy for him as well. Another big name, Elgin Jenkins. He's expected to be released before free agency. That's going to save us about $19-20 million in cap space. This one's tough. Now, obviously, he came in early, and I think one thing you saw about Elgin Jenkins was he was a grown-ass man when he showed up. He could play multiple positions in a pinch. He had that really good game against Aaron Donald and the Rams like 3, 4, 5 years ago, and I think that kind of maybe sent him to the Pro Bowl. And so it kind of elevated his status a little bit. And he's been a good player. I think injuries over the last couple of years, not just this year, but the last couple of years have kind of affected his play. I think the unfortunate reality is this coming into this year, the whole deal with bringing Aaron Banks in and swapping. We talked about it last offseason, and just in my mind, it didn't make sense because I thought Jenkins was a really good left guard, and he was being replaced by Aaron Banks, who, while as a good left guard, wasn't as good as Elgin. And then you're moving Elgin to a position where he just might not be the guy. And it turned out partially because of Aaron Banks' injuries, and then partially because of Jenkins just not being the guy at center. The thing didn't look like it worked out at all. And it ended up, obviously, he getting hurt. And then Sean Ryan takes the opportunity, steps up, and is now he's gotten paid. He's going to be paid as the starter because that's what he should be. But there are a lot of questions along this offensive line. And I think the other one you got to talk about then is Rasheed Walker. Now, say what you want about Rasheed Walker's season. This is another guy who kind of wasn't drafted with a lot of fanfare, got his opportunity to play, played well. They drafted to replace him. I think now he's being replaced maybe that replacement draft was exactly how Goody thought about it. It's kind of working out how he wanted. You probably drafted the guy too high if that's the case, but he sits for a year. He plays different positions for a year. Now you got the free agent. You kind of give him the spot. Now we'll see how that works out. But Rasheed Walker has been a very solid NFL left tackle in a place that's had exceptional left tackles for a long time. You just think about the last two in particular, full-timers, David Bakhtiari and Chad Clifton, two of the best guys in the league every year they played. So I think you got big shoes to fill there. Obviously, when you put that lens on, Rasheed Walker's maybe not quite at that level. However, solid NFL starter, done a good job for the Green Bay Packers. Happy if he goes and gets, the numbers I've heard are $20 million a year. I mean, if he goes and makes $20 million a year, boy, you got to be just absolutely thrilled for him and his family because that's life-changing now. And again, these guys come in, they prove their worth. It's like Sean Ryan. We hope you get your opportunity, you take your opportunity, you take advantage, you get paid, and then sometimes you got to go somewhere else to be appreciated more, make more money, whatever that case may be. So I think these are all big in their own way. They all have their little story and their big deals. But let's hit a couple of these different questions from the fans before I get to the big one. Is Ryan for Jenkins deal a good move or a great move? I think it's the unfortunate reality of the business, as we just kind of talked about, is that I think Jenkins, to me, and I know that Goody said he was going to be an all-pro and blah, 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 blah. And, the line coach is back. Okay. You don't move a guy who's made the Pro Bowl at left guard to center. It was never, in my opinion, that's not a good move for him. Which is why he wanted to hold out and he wanted to contract everything because the money's different. And it wasn't a good move for the team because you ended up effectively reducing the quality of play, as it turns out, in two positions. Sean Ryan came in just like I have to always look at things through the eyes of how people are executing, not where they were drafted, not if you think they're a good athlete, not if you like their haircut, not if, blah, 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 blah. He has better footwork. He has better inside hands. He tries to fight through the whistle. Is he as physically gifted? Probably not. but his execution is at a higher level now than Jenkins was at this time last year at the position. And I think you get him on the cheap. He has an opportunity to grow into that position, and then year 6, year 7, he could be a free agent that's commanding 20-some million a year, and I hope he does because that means he's done really well for the Green Bay Packers. So I like all of that, and then I think you have to tie this in a little bit with the next question, which is what is Aaron Banks' ceiling here in Green Bay? And I think the reality is Aaron Banks kind of showed us what he's going to be like towards the end of the season when he got healthy. And what is that? And that looks a lot more like what he was in San Francisco. Although, although the Shanahan scheme is similar outside zone base, blah, 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 it's always a little bit different. It makes a big difference who you're playing next to. So he had Jake Brendel, really good center, and Trent Williams, arguably the best tackle of all time, right? And particularly this guy over here, he makes a lot of problems go away. So, he was a good, not great player in San Francisco. What I loved last year is when he kind of got his feet underneath him and got healthy. You've talked about he got really good at kind of combo blocks. He got good at moving people off the spot on combo blocks. He was good at finishing plays. He had a little grit to him. He brought a little fire to that room. It felt like on game day. There's still going to be some things that because I just don't know. They didn't change anything from a position coach standpoint. I don't know what he does in the offseason, but you just don't expect them to fundamentally like change their footwork, their the hand placement, the technique stuff if you're going to keep everybody on in the same positions on staff. You just have to make some assumptions here, and he could go out and work with somebody, and then get that part of his game maybe upgraded, and then he would be that much better of a player. But I think he's going to be a really good player. I don't know that he is kind of an all-star caliber guy. He's being paid all-star caliber money is the only reason I bring that up. But I think, once you've paid that money, this year there's going to be a guard that signs for $23-24 million a year. Next year it's going to be even more than that. So by the time you get year 2, year 3, year 4 in those deals, they're not that big of really of a deal anymore as it pertains to how much money goes against the cap. So now after that first year, he's locked in. I think they just restructured him. I think it makes you feel a little bit like that's definitely a little easier to swallow, a little easier to manage. And now if you're just looking at performance on the field, if you've got a really, really solid guy, kind of fights through the whistle and gets shit done every once in a while, has a whoopsie, that's a win for the Green Bay Packers. And I think that's going to be I think he's certainly going to be at a higher level if he stays healthy throughout the season than he was at this time, or going into it last year. So what does that end up looking like? Well, I think you have improved play from the left guard. You have improved play from the center, who I think, again, is ascending. I think Belton at right guard. He's only going to get better. This is going to be year 2. You get a full offseason preparing at that position. That'd be a big deal. You've got a bona fide star, I think, in Zach Tom. And then you've got the left tackle position, which they're going to give to Jordan Morgan. We'll see if they have any competition there or not. I know that somebody was asking about Trevor. I just forgot his name, but I think that's a gimme for Morgan. Unless I would be shocked if they bring anybody in to seriously challenge him. They're obviously going to have some depth backup. They'll be talking about that in the context of, we have to have all these guys, 7, 8, 9 guys who can play all these positions, blah, blah, blah. But really, I think that's set. So, it'll be interesting. Obviously, we have the same guy calling the plays. He's very aware of strengths and weaknesses of this team. He does a very good job, I think. And we talk about this kind of to back up a little bit. We do, if you see the National Football League now, like the amount of chips from tight ends and running backs that you see on the edges now, instead of getting those guys out quickly in the routes, the amount of like delayed releases and whatnot, like it's, on one hand, I think, Kurt Warner would say that's bad for quarterback timing. On the other hand, a shitty tackle might go like, I like it a lot because it really cuts down the opportunity for that defensive end to rush the passer at a high level. So we'll see how that next year. That's always like almost a like a trend thing. So we'll see how that goes next year as far as do we want to get guys out, Jordan seeing the field a little bit better and he'll just hit the open guy, or do we want to continue to try to help those tackles if they need it? But I think net you're going to look at a better. I think you're going into the offseason now and you feel better about your offensive line. You feel better about the left guard finished the season stronger than he entered it. You feel about the center position finished the season stronger than we entered it. The right guard finished the season stronger than we entered it, and we got a good right tackle. So really, you look at Jordan Morgan. He had a good preseason last year. You feel good about if you're going to build off just what we've seen on tape so far. Obviously, they have a ton of practice film and all the classroom sessions, everything they know and can build confidence off of. So that's really and there's all question marks about how we're going to send in on the interior offensive line, but I think the only kind of unproven guy right now is maybe Jordan Morgan at left tackle. This one I liked. Bigger loss, Wooten or Jenkins. Wooten obviously getting traded for Franklin. I think the easy answer is probably because Jenkins landed on IR is Wooten. I'm just really interested. There's two things I'm really interested to see with if Quay Walker leaves. I'm interested in that contract. I know that like PFF didn't grade him really well. I think a lot of people are down on him. Like, I think he turned into a pretty good damn linebacker last year. And I think sometimes what happens is, particularly with zone defense, the grade the experts make is not contextually relevant. When you look at how he played in the box as compared to his earlier seasons, I thought he made significant strides, and I think he probably will continue to. The system that he's in matters. The coaching staff that he plays for matters, just like it does for everybody, but maybe even more with select players and others. But he could be a guy that goes somewhere and just ends up having like a Pro Bowl year, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think he's that. I mean, certainly that kind of talent, right? And just being put in the position to, the more times that Quay's forced to play at the line of scrimmage, the better he's going to be. Now, I think the difference is, again, I don't remember the injury history of Zaire Alexander, but when you watch this guy play, ball instincts, like the thought that comes up is like, we just got ourselves another Edgerrin Cooper ball instinct wise, and that's going to be fantastic. As long as they address losing Wooten, losing Rashawn Gary, losing Kenny Clark, losing TJ Slayton. Because I'm going to keep talking about him until they replace him. As soon as they bring all the guys in to take care of that front line, whether they want to bring in a massive nose tackle. I mean, you got a new defensive system this year. If you watch the Cardinals system, they didn't have a lot of stars, but I watch that system all the time, and I got players in that division. And they bring pressure like you would not believe. And they can bring five off a side. They can show it. They can go in the middle. They have a lot of their third down package is extensive and very game specific. And I say that to say that you can not, if you have one star, which we do, and then some capable guys, which we do, and you get creative and you understand like Edgerrin Cooper's a good pass rusher, we're going to use him a little bit, in a little bit different way and try to find out if whether it's Bullard, whether whoever it is on the outside is a little bit better than some of the other guys at rushing running backs, then they can create some really great, I think, third down systems and schemes. But the reality is, if I'm playing left guard and I'm not worried about the guy in front of me pass rushing, and it's like I only have to play half the game, that's a problem for the defense. And right now, I'm not saying these guys aren't quality players. I'm just saying we don't have a bona fide game wrecker inside. It'd be great to get one. Having said all that, I do think the biggest move of this offseason is losing Jeff Hafley. And in my opinion, not being there every day, watching some of the press conferences, just watching the way and just kind of understanding the way that guys in the locker room talk about that guy, how much he was revered, the change in culture to the defense in particular, And I know that obviously there was a slide after Parsons, but think about the year before. Give the guy credit for what he's done. The changing culture from the defensive staff before is just night and day. And I think, obviously bringing in, former head coach at that position now, who's got his, made his chops as defensive coordinator, puts us as a organization in a really good place to continue on and keep growing on the defensive side of the football, where we have a lot of young talent, particularly in the secondary. But that is just losing a guy like that, and losing a guy who it felt like to me was probably, and Rich Bisaccia gets a lot of credit for this too, but I've just been in a room before, like special teams guys are fantastic. You can have the best special teams guy in the world. They just don't get enough airtime in front of the entire room compared to like an offensive defense coordinator. They just don't touch enough people that often. And and the other things we've always talked about on this show is it just doesn't seem like their schedule and their routine dictates that special teams is of primary importance. And I don't know that for a fact. Just you see the play on the field, you see the guys that are running the operation, you go that those two don't really make that much sense. So what's going on here? So I think Hafley, it seemed like, was probably the strongest voice in the room in the organization as far as guys that sit up in front of the team and had an impact. Like I think it probably was him. Certainly felt that way when you watch press conferences. It certainly felt like his command of and vision and clarity and the way that he interacted, his confidence. I mean, all of it. You just felt really reassured with. And so, we'll see how that gets replaced on the field, in the meeting room, in front of the media. All of it's really interesting to me. But I think it's a huge loss. All right, last question. It's more of a football question. Somebody asked, what are the challenges? Maybe we're going to a duo scheme. I don't know. What are the challenges from going from a zone blocking scheme to like a duo scheme? And I would just the easy answer is that not much, because even if you're based in an out, like the Shanahan tree is based on outside zone scheme. You start with everything we do is based on the outside zone. We start with that reality. So all our play, we want to run outside zone. Now we're going to have toss cracks. We're going to have power, counter, inside trap, duo, lead, whatever, play action, blah, blah, blah. But everything we do is based on, like, we want that wide stretch look to suck the safety in. Quarterback keeps it, pops straight back. All of a sudden we can run deep play action passes off of that. All our crossers our timing's really good on our deeper stuff. Easier for the offensive line to block. Depending on your running back, head of steam, one kind of guy, works really well. Running away from that backside in, easier to deal with that guy. So there's just a lot of positives if you have the right personnel groups, and that's more to me about the quarterback, the running back, and some of the guys you have for the deeper outs at wide receiver, and obviously having a very, very competent and capable tight end. I think for right now, it's top level best offensive football. If you're going to a duo scheme, for those who don't know, duo is essentially you're trying to get at least two double teams on every play. So if you're going duo right, open end, just like 5-man offensive line, no tight end attached, you go, we're gonna have some sort of tackle's going to block the defensive end. We got a double team with the center and the right guard. We got a double team on the backside with the left guard and the left tackle and the 3-tech. And we're going to read the backside defensive end, or we're going to wham them, or we're going to do something with a tight end coming in and trying to seal it off. But you're going to if you're trying to get two double teams. Now, if you bring a tight end in, it's easier to block. If you bring two tight ends, you can get three double teams. But duos, effectively, I want to get two double teams. I want to push them up, and I'm just trying to get movement off those guys. And it allows our running back to get up to the line of scrimmage, bounce around, and leave. The easiest way I always think about it wasn't necessarily duo, but like Le'Veon Bell had that kind of get up to the line of scrimmage, find a spot, and then dart. That is what, unless you've got these like massive, I'm going to blow you off the football guys, that's what duo kind of feels like more often than not, is like up to the line of scrimmage fast, make that linebacker make the wrong hold decision, go the other way, get your 4 or 5, you get lucky, break a tackle, you go the distance. What are the challenges? A lot of guys actually have a harder time running some of the outside stuff because the footwork is more difficult. The inside zone, inside duo footwork is actually relatively easy. You practice, no matter what offense you're in, you're practicing combo blocks. And a lot of guys do this wrong and do this poorly, but it's just because they're either being taught wrong or they don't practice it. But just from a like, is it easier to like have to drop step, not cross over and run on a track at an angle towards the sideline versus everything's kind of staying in line and going downhill? I'm just trying to like put my feet in train tracks and get on a higher angle track and then work with one of my teammates. Like that's actually a lot easier. The harder part is if they know it's coming, they can bear down a little bit. Whereas if I'm going on an outside track, that defensive tackle, defensive end, if he doesn't move laterally, he's going to get out leveraged and his coach is going to yell at him on the sideline. So now if I can get his chest to the sideline because he feels like I've got like my helmet on his outside, or I'm taking away his ability to cover his gap. As soon as I turn him sideways, he loses relevancy for any cutbacks. I can push him up the field a little bit more, and all that gets a little bit. Once you get to that point after your first two steps, it gets a little bit easier. It's a lot harder to take a guy and say, I want to physically remove you. You're standing on the line of scrimmage. I want to move you back vertically 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yards. And you don't want to do it. Like that's a really, really difficult ask for offensive for anybody, right? I want to move a 300-pound guy off his spot. He just, as a matter of fact, doesn't want to move. So those are the difficult things. And so how does that translate to our personnel and what does that mean? You have to have great footwork. You have to go into contact with loaded hips and a great profile. A lot of that, luckily, I think, especially when you have the double teams, if you just get the footwork part right, and you just think about it as you've got one guy who's kind of the bumper and you got the other guy who's kind of the horsepower, right? So you got one guy kind of setting up the block and the other guy can come in and tee off. If you just think about it in those very, very basic terms, and that's not quite right, but just if you visualize that, you can really get good movement on these double teams, particularly on the backside. What ends up happening sometimes is you try to fit into these and get your footwork right and get your chest up too high, and you don't use your arms for weapons, and you end up getting stonewalled, and you're just kind of playing patty cake with your bellies touching like this. You're playing tummy sticks here back and forth on the line of scrimmage, and then the linebacker can make as many plays as he wants because the running back has nowhere to go because you've created no vertical space. So as an offensive lineman, you're always thinking regardless, like I want to create vertical space. I want to create vertical space. I want him to get off his spot, whether that means I'm moving him laterally to move him vertically, or I'm just trying to push him straight back. I want to gain vertical space. It's a really difficult thing to do. The best guys in the world are the guys that are getting paid the most money to do it. And so you've got to embrace that. You've got to be physical. You've got to have good hips. This is the difference between, maybe a really tall, lengthy basketball playing guy that is not as maybe powerful through the hips. Maybe he doesn't have a 5-pound bench press, but he's got good length. He's got good feet. They might enjoy doing outside zone stuff better because kind of mirroring a guy and being able to adjust to an inside move or something is easier for them because of their length or athleticism versus like you imagine like a 6'2", 330-pound, like a guy who can just root hog dudes out off the spot. He might not like the outside stuff because he doesn't have maybe the athleticism or the speed to work with a guy who wants to stay outside. That guy can pin him in, long arm, give him a hard time. Maybe he's just not built for that kind of game. We happen to have now on the outside, we've got, 311, 307-pound guys. So decent sized tackles, not huge. Great hips on the guy in the right tackle position, though. So, like, you don't worry about getting the pushes, particularly on double teams. And now inside, you actually got guys that are, 320, 330, big dudes. I think those guys are athletic enough to kind of do both. I think Sean Ryan's maybe more of like, I live in my space a little bit. Like he can get to the second level and outside stuff, but I don't know if that's his strong suit. Belton's probably the same way. I think Banks can probably do them both. He just is maybe a little more nimble when you look at him. I mean, for that size, But I think the good part about that is, and I'm carrying on about the intricacies of line blocking too much. But I think the good part about that is the inside guys usually aren't the problem on outside zone. They can be, like the 3 technique can beat the guard, but they're usually not the problem. The problem usually happens out on the edge, and it's just because that guy isn't able to get the defensive ends shoulder pads turned toward the sideline, or he's the guy can kind of long arm him, tent pole him, and hold the edge and force that running back to cut back too early. I think both the guys we got out there have the ability to do a great job, not a good job, but a great job at capturing the edge and really forcing leverage on the edge players, defensive ends, edge players, whatever you want to call them, on the outside zone stuff. I also think with most duo inside zone things, if you're play side and you're a single block, like those blocks aren't as important on duo. Like you want to keep your space, you want to stay square, you want to keep the gap wide. Like you don't want to have your ass in the hole and get blocked back. The double teams are kind of where you make your money. You just it's like don't screw up that block. If you do great, fantastic. Just don't screw it up. Make your money on the doubles. And I think both those guys are more than capable, particularly with bigger dudes inside, of getting moving on the double teams. So there's no reason that we shouldn't be good at either. I go back to the offset outside zone run where the running back's coming across the quarterback's face, and we got beat at right guard over and over and over. We just kept running it during the course of the year. That block is the critical block for a guard to learn. And if you go back and watch all of those, it's a technique issue. It's not an athleticism issue. And sometimes it also turns into, because especially when Zach Tom was hurt, that right tackle wasn't as secure. They weren't pushing that. They weren't stretching that edge. And so we're having to run off this 3 technique too often, or running into the 3 technique too often. So, like they always say, the offensive line always has to work in it's got to be, was it symbiosis, whatever it is. What's that word? My vocabulary is struggling. Anyways, guys, that's all we got for today. Thanks for watching. I always appreciate the comments and the questions. I don't know if and when we'll come back to Block Party. Maybe if there's some draft guys as we get closer that are like bona fide, these could be Green Bay Packer guys, and you guys want to get some film on them, hit me up. I'll probably do it. All right, I'm Mike Wahle. Check me out, Mike Wahle68 on Twitter, Process to Perform on Instagram. Guys, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time.